Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Beastly Eel. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about episode 5 of Creature Commandos. In this episode, this was actually Eric Frankenstein's episode more than anybody else's. So this episode begins, with the group going to where the princess is to go take her out. And Rick Flag is now teaming up with Frankenstein to try to figure out what's going on to prove that Cersei was a liar. So we have the Creature Commandos land in the country where they have the escort from the Royal Knights. During all that time, we then have Rick Flag, who is trying to call the country and has failed multiple times. However, this time it actually works and explains to them that the U.S. government is trying to kill them and the Creature Commandos are there to take out the princess. She realizes what's going on and she calls to let Alexis know what's going on. He understands and begins to drive them around as far away from the castle as possible. And that's pretty much how that episode kind of goes for them. And we'll touch base on them in a minute. Let's get back to Frankenstein and Rick Flag. So the two of them begin to go undercover at the college where that professor was that gave all the information about Cersei. So they look at the college, and the professor's acting very strange, asking what's the most important thing about Themyscira, and he's the professor is flirting with this young girl, and it's like, no, it's about the lesbians, and that's the most important part of Themyscira. And so Rick is kind of like, this is obviously weird because this isn't how she was acting before. Clearly something's going on. So he eventually tells Frank that they should go to her house, her place that she lives, to have a better understanding of what's going on. So they go to her place, they start going through everything. Turns out that Rick Flag finds the professor's body. She was obviously killed, and that somebody else must be posing as her. And of course, Frankenstein's his usual self, like, we just saw her. How is she dead? And he's like, it's obviously that somebody's either shape-shifting or somebody's disguised as her. So anyway, the professor comes home. They hide. Frank doesn't do a great job of it, but he eventually does so. They then find out that it's actually Clayface that is the professor. And they begin to try to sneak away because Rick Flag tells Frank that Clayface is not one to mess with. They try to get away. They get basically tentacled by Clayface, and they begin to have a beatdown. Rick Flag gets beat up really bad, and Frankenstein only wins because he pulls the Xbox out of the socket, then pulls the wires out of the socket, causing himself to be electrocuted, which causes Clayface to be electrocuted, which he explodes, and Frankenstein is able to get Rick Flag out of there. And that's how that part of the episode ends. So we have the flashback of Frankenstein, right after he and the bride get into that big fight. He's apparently lit on fire, which we kind of already knew already, and he floats down the river as a burning corpse to our thought. He's hit in the river where he is basically stopped by a bunch of rocks, where this dog finds him, and this blind gypsy woman finds him and brings him in and starts to heal him. He wakes up, is all ticked off about what's going on, and she's explaining to him, like, she's saving him and that, he should be grateful. During his healing time, she's teaching him different things and everything else about life and everything else, and more the fact of that beauty is not just in sight alone. It could be in many different things, and she shows him by having him close his eyes and think about the bride. And he's like, oh, that's such beauty. And she's like, yeah, but you're not using your eyes, you're using your imagination. And she's like, that's how I live every day. So he begins to hunt for her, get food for them, and everything else. Then he gets to the point where he's healed up enough, where he's ready to go. And he locks the dog outside of the home. And the old woman is very sad that he's leaving, and she's like, I'm going to be so distraught without you. I don't want to be alone. I've been alone for so long. You know, that you were the greatest thing that has happened to me. And Frankenstein's like, I'm not going to let you die alone. And he grabs a pot and smashes her head in, so she dies. Because he didn't want her to die alone. He then leaves with the dog, and the dog follows him without a problem, and they, I'm assuming, have their life together until the dog obviously passes. And that is the end of that part of the episode. So then the final part is the one with our Creature Commandos. They have made it obviously to the country. They're realizing that they're being sent all around without going to the places that they need to go. And that's when the bride and Dr. Phosphorus is putting two and two together, where they realize that they're being bamboozled. So Dr. Phosphorus kills Alexis with a punch to the back of the head, which melts his brain. And that's when the bride comes out and begins to open fire on everyone else. So the group splits up. And unfortunately, they split up and are unable to find each other. So Weasel and Nina are running away. Weasel's running into the trash and everything else. Nina's hiding in an abandoned building. And then we have Dr. Phosphorus and the bride causing a lot of damage to the army. Dr. Phosphorus is going through tanks with his radiated skin, and melts through people with ease, crushing them to death, and begins to walk away unfazed, trying to hide from the rest of the group that is basically the rest of the army hunting them down. Bride does the same thing in the sense of she takes out groups and groups of men with ease, until the point she goes after one of the royal knights that takes out their gauntlets, which she then uses to take out the rest of the group without a problem, and then begins to go into hiding, looking for the rest of the Creature Commandos. However, she's being extra quiet because she doesn't want to be found, because I believe all of her weapons are pretty much drained. So the episode ends with the four of them running away from the army that the princess has, to try to make sure that they can hunt her down and kill her. And that is the end of that episode. So the next episode is definitely them going to the princess in some sort of capacity, and I hope we find out what happens to Rick Flag. But for now, if you like, let me know if you like this episode or not, and why, in the comments down below. And as always, if you like the content you see, please make sure to like and subscribe down below. Other than that, this is going to be Beastly Eels signing out. Have a wonderful night. Bye-bye.